All right, quarterfinals. We got Adrien Becker on Orcish Survival, which on the deck list he had mid-range jacking as the original deck name with a line through it, and Orcish Survival as the the final name.
I couldn't be more psyched for this. This is exactly what makes Vintage such an awesome format. The pool is so deep that there's just tons of room for brewing. Adrien is one of the most successful players, going really deep into the card pool and finding just outrageous ways of winning. You'll remember his previous list that he had done so well with was a workshop deck that didn't play Black Lotus, but instead played other important zero drops like Memnite in order to win the game. He absolutely moves past convention and finds ways of winning, and that's almost a game within a game. This list uses Orcish Lumberjack to power out massive monsters. I'm not going to spoil it and tell you which ones yet. Hopefully we'll see a bunch of them on camera, but it is very fun. I had a deck like this back in Invasion Block and had like Shivan Worm off of Orcish Lumberjack. I think a lot of people had that, and this is a throwback to that, but it's so much better. As Survival of the Fittest is a toolbox to go get those monsters when you need them, but has a lot of utility guys in there. Magus of the Moon completely shuts down a lot of the mana bases in the format. He's got Hammer Mage. He's a really big fan of that card. He was actually concerned about that card when he was playing his previous list and didn't understand why people weren't running it because it's so successful in Classic online. That guy is just a Wrath of God versus artifacts. Scavenging Ooze is amazing in this deck. It just becomes enormous. So very fun list. On the other side of the table, we've got Vladimir's 4-color Keeper. Now, we were just talking before the camera started rolling here. Keeper is a reference to the old school 5-color control decks. Now, their mana bases back then didn't have fetch lands, so you had City of Brass, and you also had the main card was called Elemental Augury, which is basically like a Sensei's Top that worked on your opponent. So you're able to look at your opponent's top 3 cards and rearrange them, keeping them, or Keeper, away from the good cards. That was in the Grixis colors, so it actually cost a blue, a red, and a black for a 3-mana enchantment. And that was the differentiation between why would you want to go 5-color versus the mono blue decks, which were also a reasonable choice around that era. So here we got a Trinket Mage off of a Mana Crypt, tons of mana on Vlad's side of the board, and coming out swinging versus Adrien. Let's see whose creatures are better. Orcish Lumberjack. Now they just reprinted that in the Heroes versus Monsters dual deck as well, so those are going to be available to people.
Huh.
Bolting it out of the gate.
So let's see. Does he get bolted back? No.
Looks like we're playing the odds here, which is really the right play.
Yeah, always. You gotta... my advice is from the very first time you sleeve up your Mana Crypt, you have to choose odds or evens from that very moment and go with it for the rest of your career. Otherwise, you could really screw yourself with the odds.
I remember on the Mana Drain, for those of you who are familiar with that, I had posted a thread years ago about what are your tips for naming heads or tails or rolling dice for Mana Crypt. Of course, as a joke thread, because people tend to take themselves very seriously back in the day. And it turned into a multiple-page thing of people actually being serious about their strategies for heads or tails or what type of dice to use. And, of course, the shenanigans about spin-down dice and all of that different stuff. So it was pretty enlightening. The real test for all the viewers out there, you got to actually get out there and play. At the end of the day, that's the important thing. That's what keeps the format going. The writing about it on a forum isn't actually playing, and it's important to remember that. And Adrien really embodies that spirit here. I mean, this isn't some theoretical deck that he's bouncing around. He's not looking for validation from the community. He's just building a deck and playing it and having a blast, and you can't ask for any more than that. And he's been successful with it. Here he is in the top 8 of this tournament. It was a really good field, and he was actually in first place after the end of the Swiss. Now, the play draw rule was not in effect here. I'm actually not a fan of that rule. I feel like it really changes, not necessarily for better or worse, but it definitely changes the behavior at the end of a tournament in terms of incentivizing people to play out matches that they'd otherwise ID. It really kind of create some feel-bads at the end of a tournament where maybe both people can get into the top 8 and one of them really wants the better tiebreakers. What are your feelings on that?
Well, there's you know, there's two schools of thought. There's the thought that, well, if you play perfectly throughout the whole entire tournament, then you deserve to have the option of being on the play or not. And then there's, like you said, the it kind of gets rid of the ability to ID into the top 8. And I mean, it really just depends on what position you're in towards the end of the tournament. If you're on the bubble, then you're gonna want to be able to have the option of IDing and not get dream crushed. Basically, the play draw rule is encouraging the dream crushing.
Oh, it really does. Absolutely. It encourages that. It also, encourages people to be playing out more rounds instead of, taking a break before the top 8. I personally enjoy being able to get a little bit of a breather, as often happens. Though I do a lot of trading too. I'm spinning a lot of plates when I'm doing these tournaments. I'm playing and I'm trying to trade as much as possible, handling judge calls and stuff. So a breather is nice for me. Maybe it's different for bigger events, but for these small events, it certainly helps. Now, we've got Squee with a survival engine. For those of you not familiar, that's going to allow him to tutor up whatever he wants every turn for the low cost of 1 mana. He's also grabbing Anger. That's going to make all of his guys haste as long as he has a mountain in play, which could become relevant with Orcish Lumberjack. If he gets too aggressive getting rid of mountains, his guys could lose haste. So he's got to show a little bit of restraint with the Lumberjacks.
And fetching.
Looks like he just shuffled. He's really probably multiple lines here that he's considering. If he's going to fetch now and he just shuffled, then he probably wasn't totally confident on his line. A lot of different ways he could go here. So
shuffling gives you time to think. I find shuffling very almost therapeutic, and kind of like just gives you time to think, and it's something that's just all muscle memory.
That may be it too. Maybe he's got enough to think about here that he wants to buy himself some time without going into the tank so early in the matchup. So we've got another Orcish Lumberjack.
Okay.
And he's going to be able to survival away that Anger to go get something exciting next turn. Will he do it now?
He could survival away the Anger for something for next turn, and then I think I saw a Magus of the Moon in his hand. So you could Magus. Oh. We got a
Snapcaster Bolt. Interesting. So we could see Adrien use the Orcish Lumberjack, depending on what he has left in hand. He could go get another Orcish Lumberjack, play it, use it to sack that other forest, and then play a gigantic hasty monster this turn. That could be happening now that Vlad's tapped off.
Do you have to tap Orcish Lumberjack to activate him?
Yes.
Did he play the Orcish Lumberjack this turn?
It has haste because of Anger.
Oh,
so
sick.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'd like to see those basic forests go into the bin. Maybe he's really leaning toward getting a Blood Moon effect, but I don't think Blood Moon's going to be very helpful here.
Yeah.
Vlad's most threatening kill is going to be a Time Vault, which is colorless mana anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tinker also wins. That's definitely a factor, but overall, I'm not sure Blood Moon is really that powerful at this point. I think maybe you just want to close out the game as quickly as possible. See which line he goes for. I'm voting for sack a forest, go get an Orcish Lumberjack, play an Orcish Lumberjack, sack the other forest, or go get a monster, play the monster.
Orcish Lumberjack makes red or green?
Yeah. No, it's like better than Black Lotus. You get to choose. Any combination. It's like red, red, green, 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 red.
Wow.
Yeah, it's Christmas.
Just in time for the holidays.
Absolutely. The new art is actually it's pretty boss. I mean, the guy is like a jacked up orc with an axe. I mean, he's like a lumberjack orc, exactly what you'd expect. This art is, fanciful, silly. Ice Age's art. The art was totally different back then.
Yep.
But the new guy will mess you up. I feel like that's the play, is to play the old art. That way people aren't as inclined to counter them. The new guy sends the signal that he is here to wreck house.
Yeah. Old one's not scary at all.
Well, Vlad seems to know better. He has been bolting them. Actually using his Snapcaster here to get the second one. So
So he's
So he
gonna
has 2 mana floating right now. Or 3 mana floating.
3 mana floating. He can tutor up a Jack.
Go to 2
which
mana.
He does. And then up to 5.
Up to 5. If he's got a 5-drop in his hand and he's got some sick ones in the deck,
Yeah.
then it could come out right now. Hopefully that's what he's got in his hand, because it would be amazing. Alright, let's see where he goes here. What is that in his hand?
Magus, I believe.
Ah, that's not good enough. Orcish Lumberjack, green floating. Yeah, he can get a 4-drop into play if he survivals that away. At 4 mana...
He could play one of his X. Are we spoiling it?
No, let's not spoil it.
Okay. Alright.
We'll definitely make sure to talk about all of the deck choices before the end of Adrien's final game, for sure. But there's just too much.
So
too much craziness. Now, it's worth noting, he is running 3 Birds of Paradise, 2 Noble Hierarchs. He's got the early ramp. You know, those are totally solid cards with survival, especially with Anger, because you play them for 1 and then they recoup their mana right away, allow you to ramp and build toward a better board state.
Now, is the Noble Hierarch better than a 4th Birds of Paradise in a red-green deck?
Well, I think Adrien feels that. I think the tapping for red is going to be relevant for Orcish Lumberjack and for some of these monsters. But you are going to have a lot of red mana off of your Magus of the Moon, so I'm sure he's testing all of this stuff. This is a very new list.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't something that I've ever seen in Vintage before. I don't know if it's a classic deck that he's adapting or if it's just his own brew completely, but it's showing us some new cards that we did not think were playable. Now, Gilded Drake just went to the bin, setting up some kind of survival chain here. Now, let's see. It looks like he's just thinning the deck by making that play.
Well, unless he's getting a monster to play next turn.
Well, I mean by survivaling the Gilded Drake away. Oh, Hammer Mage.
And Hammer Mage destroys artifacts?
Yeah. No, he'll get rid of the Skull Clamp and the Voltaic Key, and wow.
Oh, he gets rid of the mana.
Alrighty.
Oh no, 1. It's X or less, right?
Yeah.
So, board wipe city.
Yep. Wow, that's a beating. But look at that. Vlad's down to a couple of wizards versus an active survival and a whole team of hasty guys. That Hammer Mage can trade straight up with the Snapcaster. He's a 1/1. And Trinket Mage beats are no longer looking very threatening.
Adrien's on Hellbent with 1 land.
But he's going to get Squee back next turn.
Oh, yeah, Squee. I forgot about that guy.
He's going to be able to go get... Every turn, he's going to draw the best creature in his deck. Oh, Wasteland. That's a timely Wasteland.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Orcish Lumberjack is a 1/1?
It is a 1/1.
And Hammer Mage...
is a 1/1.
Yeah.
So, Trinket Mage looking pretty big compared to the rest of the board right now. But Snapcaster very fragile in combat at the moment. Now, Vlad's got just a Force in hand.
Adrien didn't bring his Squee back. Probably not important this turn. Now, one plan with survival, in an early turn, you can just cycle throughout all your Squees.
Yeah, he only runs the Singleton Squee.
Oh, just one Squee.
Because you very rarely are going to need to do that multiple times. I actually don't like that attack. We'll see if it becomes relevant. If Vlad's able to land another Snapcaster Mage, even for no value, that gets pretty ugly. Pushing through the extra damage.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Well,
I can see arguments on both sides.
Changing it from a 3 to a 2-turn clock is definitely a value in and of itself.
There's the argument, of course, he would be able to block with the Orcish Lumberjack the next turn. There's really only 2 life at most.
He probably sees that Lumberjacking is probably like his only out right now. What kind of creature does he have in his hand? Is it a creature? What does he got? I want to see things happen. This deck is cool.
Got a Force and a Tinker in hand. Coming in for 4, trading it up.
Alright.
Yeah, if we get any mana on Adrian's side of the board, it is not going to be difficult to stabilize here.
So he's returning Squee.
He's really just looking at a 2/2.
Swinging again because he has no intention of blocking. He's got a mountain in hand.
Really?
I think so. I thought I saw like an unhinged mountain.
Birds, Squee.
Oh no,
survival.
I was looking at a Squee.
Birds? Yeah. So if he hits some mana, he's going to be able to throw out a bunch of birds. It's going to get really interesting. Kind of rebuild the mana base. Not only will it rebuild the mana base, it'll allow him to chump block, buy some time.
He's only got one shot at this. He's got one draw step. Nope. Scavenging Ooze. Yeah.
And we've got a Vamp, and that'll do it. Vamp gets Bolt and closes out the deal. Alright. So Adrian's deck down a game, despite getting Survival online. It was that timely Wasteland from Vlad that really made the huge difference.
Yeah.
That was a game changer for sure. The Hammer Mage play was absolutely brutal, but he was really all in on that, and then losing the Survival.
So Hammer Mage was, I was tempted to say it was a 4-for-1, but how many cards did he invest into that? How many lands did he have to sacrifice? What was it actually? Was it a 1-for-1?
Well, Hammer Mage costs 2 mana.
Yep.
So, 2 mana and then 2 more to activate. I believe he had mana floating at the end. So he may have, you could say he sacked 2 forests to make that happen.
2 forests plus the Hammer Mage. Well, the Hammer Mage wasn't really a sacrifice because he stays in play. So it was a 2-for-1. It ended up being a 2-for-1 at the end of the day. A Squee, and a Gilded Drake. He had to discard the Squee and the Gilded Drake. But like the Gilded Drake was a swap for the Hammer Mage, which was a permanent that stayed in play. So that's not necessarily like. Oh, okay. So that was a 3-for-4, which is still a fine trade.
Well, Squee was one of the cards, which comes back.
Alright, so it's a 2-for-1. 2-for-4, which is a 2-for-1.
Overall, it was amazingly powerful, but
Yeah.
the Wasteland was the problem.
Yeah.
Wasteland. So what would have been able to happen had he not gotten Wastelanded right out of the game? He would have been able to go get some birds, start building his mana base back up, and just completely taken off with the game. Discard Squee, go get a bird next turn. Play a bird, go get a bird. Every single turn, definitely be revamping, and at some point
get up to like 6 mana to do something awesome.
And you can even use the Orcus Lumberjack at some point if necessary. So he really ideally wants to have a mountain in play to have all his guys have haste.
Right. So sideboard cards. I mean, I could see him bringing in his red blasts, maybe.
Yeah, Grim Lavamancer.
Yeah.
That's definitely playable. Caldera Hellion. That card.
I don't even know what that does.
So that is a Shards of Alara limited bomb. You sacrifice creatures when it enters the battlefield. Devour 1. And then when it enters the battlefield, it does 3 damage to each creature. So it's a 3/3, and you sack your team and kill everything, and it ends up with a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, which will be relevant later. You will see why.
I mean, your team was going to die anyway, right? It's 3 damage.
Well, his team's not going to die. His team is enormous. Hopefully we'll get to see it work. But yeah, all of those birds and paradise and stuff that you'd be sacking, absolutely for the greater good there. We've got Scavenging Ooze in the sideboard, Hammer Mage. I mean, basically more things to get with the Survival.
Toolbox City.
Yeah, I definitely think the Grim Lavamancer comes in. I mean, you've got Snapcasters, Trinket Mage, Deathrite Shaman, Young Pyromancer. So many cards on the other side of the table. Now, he didn't see all of them, but I think he can kind of sniff out what he's up against based off of those draws. and expect it to be some kind of controlling deck. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he expects Dark Confidant to be in the build. So at that point, you're definitely bringing in Grim Lavamancer. If you're not bringing it in there, probably no reason for it to be in the deck.
Yeah.
Now, Grim Lavamancer seems like it would do a lot of work versus Merfolk as well. I mean, that can really shoot down the Lords one at a time. Target Phantasmal Image, get him out of there. So
I mean, back in older Mental Misstep days of Legacy, he was the reason that Merfolk. He was one of the big reasons that Merfolk just couldn't beat Rug or Zoo. I mean, they had the islands to island walk through, but just continually being able to shoot down a fish every turn, it was like shooting fish in a barrel.
I can definitely see that. Now, on Vlad's side of the table, he's got Fire Ice. That could be very, very valuable in terms of getting rid of multiple Orcus Lumberjacks or other mana acceleration creatures. We have a... What else here? Anything? Notion Thief. I mean, there's some spicy numbers in here. Nothing that looks too necessary.
I mean, how much sideboard space do you dedicate to green-red survival?
Yeah, I mean, approximately this much, which looks like 0. Yeah. I mean, one of the only things that you could say is it's possible that whatever people are bringing in against Oath could potentially be good versus survival. You know, in terms of nature's claims and stuff. But if they're able to cycle through with any extra green mana, a lot of the time they can just undo that. Now let's see if he's running the Eternal Witness in his list. No, he is not. No Eternal Witness yet. I'll be interested to see if that makes the cut down the line.
Very interesting, you know, pitch a creature, to get the Witness, cast the Witness, you have a body on the table, and you have the card you pitched. Seems pretty good.
It can allow for some real abuse with things like Time Walk, Ancestral.
So Adrien, I think they're both keeping their openers. Vladimir having a mana drain and a demonic tutor and like a force.
Yeah, it looks like force and some mana. That's going to be difficult to really. Let's see if he forces this. That would be quite the play.
Adrien.
Nobody wants to force a will a
turn one jacking
lumberjack. Now opting not to go with green there, or with black for the DT, would have been reasonable to tap out for a DT there.
Yeah.
Does he not have access to it? I mean, I see dual lands. I don't know if they're the black. It looks like one of them's a volcanic. It's going to be a real bottleneck otherwise.
I mean, maybe he's planning on just using Mystical on the end step and he doesn't want to DT right away. He's in a situation where he doesn't exactly know what he needs to DT for, so it's not...
Yeah, his robot is mere Battlesphere, so again, we're seeing non-Blightsteel Colossus robots here.
Yeah, well, the Battlesphere, if you bounce it with Jace, you still have 4 dudes on the table. You don't quite get blown out as much.
Yeah, I think that's what people are hedging against. Is trying to not just auto lose. It's also much more castable.
Yeah, what is it, like 7, 8?
7, I believe.
Yeah. So Adrien, one of the more careful players I know, really considering all his options. I mean, with a toolbox, he's like the one he has access to. You really have to have a strong plan going into it. You can't just sort of run things out there and see what happens.
Yeah, and especially with a list like he's running here, you know, when you play Control or Show and Tell or whatever the different decks that we're running, we have the added benefit of seeing other people play them, learning from their mistakes, and learning as a community as well. When you're really forging your own path, you've got to think it all through because you're the only one doing the testing on the deck. A deck like this, you could pick up, play sloppy for one tournament, throw it in the trash bin because you think it's no good. But if you had played it more carefully and more precisely, then you might have been able to, oh, there we go, Hammer Mage, might have been able to put up better results and completely change your perspective on it. So Hammer Mage, really, really good versus the, oh, Animate Dead. Running Animate Dead?
No, is that what that is?
I mean, I was going to say something about Hammer Mage, and then I saw Animate Dead, and I'm consulting the list. That is an Animate Dead in the sideboard.
What?
I mean, that's got to be good versus survival if they discard one of their big creatures. That would be some serious next level stuff going on.
This is not Vladimir's first rodeo. Nice tech.
So looks like, is he going to be willing to discard? No, he's not on Hammer Mage.
He has to discard anything right now. He's just kind of going to play a big old spell. Got 5 mana in the pool right now. Well, about to anyway.
I think
Access
Adrien's
6.
very concerned about Wasteland after that previous game. Now it looks like Vladimir only has 2 wastes and a strip.
Colonial
Here's a
Hydra.
Colonial Hydra.
It's going to get drained, or is it? Red Blast says otherwise.
Wow.
So how much mana? Colonial Hydra is X and a green, right?
No, Colonial Hydra is 3 and 2 green. This is the one that comes into play with 4 counters, and whenever it attacks, it doubles the number of counters on all your creatures.
Jeez.
So that Caldera Hellion, those Devour counters are very relevant. And Scavenging Ooze.
Oh,
to
man.
just double up the number of counters on that guy. Very, very good with haste, especially. You're just swinging for 8. That's bigger than
synergy.
Literally bigger than Vladimir's robot.
EE at 2, big deal.
Yeah, that's.
What are you gonna blow up a Hammer Mage?
Just a Hammer Mage, yeah. That's probably the least threatening card on board right now.
Yeah.
But it does prevent Vlad from stealing the win with assembling a combo.
Yeah, with the Vault Key.
Vault Key. You know, or getting a Skull Clamp out there. Now that guy has Trample too.
What?
So very, very hard to stabilize against it. We've got a Noble Hierarch.
Gonna crack for 5. Next turn it's gonna be
9. It doubles now.
Oh shoot. Wow. When it attacks?
Yeah.
That's gross.
Yeah, now worth noting, he also has, we're not going to spoil all of it, but it's not the only Hydra in the deck. There is another Hydra in there.
Looks like he's gonna run something out right now.
Magus of the Moon.
Yeah.
Good timing for Magus.
Yeah. Nice volcanic islands, dude, man. Oh. Now, he didn't force the Hydra. Did he just not have the
That was
blue
last
card?
turn, yeah.
Oh,
he had the force no blue card.
Yeah.
He drew a blue card for turn. There's the Wasteland, and the Hydra takes that one down. Next turn, it swings for 17.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, creatures have been getting better. They really have, especially since the last time I played with Orcish Lumberjacks. Yeah, the only downside to him is you run out of forests.
Yeah. Which is, you know, maybe a metaphor for sort of like a Fern Gully type scenario.
I think you might have a screenplay there. Some kind of Magic the Gathering starring Orcish Lumberjack. I could see it.
Did you say starring Hugh Jackman?
There you go. Who's going to play Colonial Hydra? That's the real question.
Yeah. Okay.
18 Jim Carreys. Now the deck is no joke, though. He does have Ancestral Time Walk. Now, Adrien believes this deck could be played unpowered without giving up too much value, but he is on Ruby, Emerald, and Sapphire. And I think those cards are important in the list. Now,
no Lotus?
He must have Lotus as well.
Lotus.
Yeah. Now, he does have 3 Null Rods, which would lean toward being unpowered. And Elvish Spirit Guide and Simian Spirit Guide are totally reasonable cards for a deck like this. Probably more toward the Elvish Spirit Guide, given those extra survival activations, especially the surprise survival, end of turn, go get the bomb, and just complete blowout.
Yeah. In some scenarios, in some corner case situations, that's actually better than having the mocks, just for the surprise element.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Elvish Spirit Guide, there is a huge amount of overlap in terms of being just as good as Moxes, and there are times where it's actually better. It's just the times where the Moxes are better, they're really,
Way
really
better.
better. And that's the problem there. You are definitely sacrificing by playing unpowered, but we compensate for that by having phenomenal prize support for the unpowered players. So I would like to see more people sleeving this up and kind of see what type of evolution happens.
So Vladimir going to be on the play with his. He's got a Chain Lightning in hand and a Mana Drain and a Nile Spellbomb. Contemplating whether or not to keep, I believe.
I think that Chain Lightning has Orcish Lumberjack written all over it. I think he's recognizing how powerful that card is and is going to want to get him out of there as soon as possible. You know, the danger of him, though, is if you have haste because of like a survival activation with Anger in the bin, the guy's just a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
Getting rid of him might not even matter because they could just be playing something like a hasty Colonial Hydra that is just going to kill you. And Chain Lightning's not going to do anything there.
Shuffling his hand away, going to take 6. Adrien keeping his 7. I see a Red Blast and stuff. I don't know.
Unrecognizable cards, which will soon show to the community.
We'll figure it out.
That was good discipline by Adrien to be able to have the Red Blast backup. A lot of the time, decks like this struggle to use Red Blast effectively because they're using so much of their mana. But if you can just hold back and force through that bomb with the Red Blast at that opportune moment, it can really just run away with the game. I mean, Colonial Hydra, I mean, it doesn't matter what your opponent's life total is. They're dead in very short order when that guy starts attacking.
Yeah.
And he pumps all of the other guys with +1/+1 counters as well.
If he dies, right?
No, this is the guy that whenever he attacks, all of them double.
Oh, yeah.
So, Mistcutter Hydra's in the deck. You can potentially like play a Mistcutter Hydra for like 6, attack with them both, and then he gets bumped up to a 12/12.
Mistcutter Hydra is an X and a green, or
X and a green, can't be countered, and pro blue.
Yeah, it seems relevant.
He does.
And he has haste. Jeez.
Yeah, he's a Jace killer. I mean, at the very least, he's a Jace killer. But it's a card that you can just survival for. So we've got Mana Crypt here into a Nile Spellbomb and the Underground Sea to go along with it. He will be able to cycle this to draw a card. It could potentially grab a Squee, kind of bottleneck the survival plan. So far, survival hasn't been the most important element of the deck. So we'll see how this goes. Lotus, that's going to be big.
Yep, stuff is happening on turn 1. This is just like the ultimate Timmy deck, like powered to the max.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, it's just the creatures have gotten good enough that this is a valid play.
I remember playing with something like that. See, I remember, like, when I was younger, one of my buddies had a Reanimator deck that was, like, you know, not quite where Reanimator is today in Legacy, but, like, now Reanimator's a thing. One of my buddies had this kind of deck where he played Orcish Lumberjack to ramp into dragons. I think he was playing Shivan Worm and, like, Lightning Dragon at the time. And now it's like you said, the power curve, the power creep on the creatures is catching up to the rest of the spells in Magic.
Yeah, it's certainly making it interesting. We've got Magus of the Moon here, blanking, it looks like a fistful of duels from Vladimir. Basic Force on Adrien's side of the table, and that Mana Crypt is going to be a huge problem now.
Adrien having access to red-green.
That Mana Crypt is making it look like it wasn't necessarily worthwhile to put out that Nile Spellbomb and have the black open. At the time, it didn't look that menacing. Now, it looks like it severely speeds up Adrien's clock. I think the thought process there was use it to draw a blue card, use the black to draw a blue card and force a will. No such luck.
Didn't work out. You just didn't want to go down to 6. I mean, to 5, rather.
I'm not saying necessarily that he'd want to mull it, just that whether or not to play that first turn Mana Crypt is what I'm considering here. So Phantasmal Image, all in on Magus of the Moons.
All in red. So he's got access to 2, 3, 4, 5 mana for next turn. Potentially 6 if he makes a land drop. I can think of some cool stuff that costs 6 in his deck right now. Or less. Yep, there's his first damage. See, he ended up rolling odds because he forgot to trigger it at the beginning of his upkeep.
The magic gods are vengeful.
Yep.
So we're looking at 4 turn. Still needs to name something off of Cavern, but it's not going to matter for the rest of this game.
4/5. Colonial Hydra. Yep. You are dead next turn, Vladimir.
Coming across for 12.
Scoopage.
Yeah, that Magus of the Moon was very, very good there.
Yeah. And Phantasmal Image is good for the same reasons it was good in Merfolk too. Like you can just copy a Grizzlebrand if that's the play, you know. But yeah, that was a really, really cool game. I look forward to hopefully we get another instance of Adrien on camera. So that was the first round of the quarterfinals, and we'll see you for the semifinals.